Hello. I'm not very good at creating content, but hopefully what I share here will help someone in the future. This is the start of a new channel dedicated to some of my musings, and the content I have in mind to present is probably intended mostly for Christians, but perhaps could help anyone. At the moment, I have two topics in mind, relationships and God is real and he talks to me. I thought I would start with a bit about relationships and then bring in how the second topic, which is God talks to me, ties in or is relevant to relationships. Now, these musings are based on my own experiences, and to give you a little bit of my background, I'm over 60 years old. I've been married twice, and I've had a few other serious relationships. If there's anything that I say here that's worthwhile, it's because of all the mistakes I've made. You can feel free to disagree with anything you hear or read because these are all, after all, just my own opinions. Okay, so I think what I want to do is I want to focus on the relationship topic by using the one that I think is most significant to me, which is the one that I'm now in. And here's a very uh, high level timeline of what happened. Where we met in a class, we became friends over time, we started dating and moved in, we had issues, there was a breakup, and then try to remain close friends. Now, I also want to add, even though it seems like for someone who's watching and is interested in a real relationship that this might be in the story, but it's not. I don't believe this is in the story. I believe there's going to be something else after this, and let's call it rebirth, I guess. But we'll see. But there's enough good material, I think, with where we are today that I'm going to go ahead and start this anyway. In a sense, these videos will be a journey that I have been on and I'm still on, and I don't know the end result. And I'm starting these videos on faith that God will bless me when it's all said and done. The difference in age between myself and my wife for the first marriage was 4 years, so I was 4 years older, and the second marriage I was 6 years older. And to me, thinking about being involved or being interested, I should say, in someone much younger than me meant maybe 8 to 10 years would be someone much younger than me. But the year after my second marriage ended, something very interesting happened. That year, my daughter, my first ex-wife, kid's mom, and my future daughter-in-law had all gone to a week retreat. And then they came back. I happen to be on pretty good terms with my first ex-wife. And they all came back, and independently, I don't know, I got a chance to see each one of them for some different reason independently. And each of them, of all the things they could have talked about and mentioned, they mentioned something about that they heard or saw in the retreat. And it was nothing deep about what was being presented in the retreat. They all made sure to tell me, hey, the lady, the keynote speaker, the lady, she's 25 years younger than her husband. Now I'm going to start mixing in the second topic, which is God talks to me. Now, regarding the topic of God talks to me for this video, I don't want to get too much into or at all into the theology of how I know that God talks to me. I probably should do another video just on that topic alone. Now, just before the three women, my daughter, my ex-wife, and my daughter-in-law, had talked to me and mentioned about the speaker being 25 years younger than her husband. Right before that, right around here somewhere, I had been given the story in the Bible of Boaz and Ruth. I hadn't noticed this before, but I guess the Lord focused my attention on this particular verse at that time. And if you read Ruth chapter 3, verse 10, it says, "The Lord bless you, my daughter." He replied, that would be Boaz speaking, "This kindness is greater than that which you showed me earlier." Meaning, this kindness is she's asking him to take her as his wife. "You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor." And that told me that Boaz was old enough to the point where he never considered having an interest in Ruth. He would never have approached her in that way because he was so much older than her. So I started praying about this and specifically asking God about this novel idea, this revolutionary idea, for at least from my point of view, that he would actually have someone for me in the future that would be so much younger than me that I would never consider her and I would be essentially behaving like Boaz. However, one thing that I have learned about God along the way of my life, and that is that he will test you. So once you think you're clear that what God is saying to you or what God is promising you, then typically there comes the test. Because really, if it's not possible for you to doubt, then really you're not exercising faith. Faith exists in the presence of doubt. So immediately after I thought I knew what God was saying, then around, say, about right here, I took my daughter out to eat, and my daughter, who is about 30 years younger than me, maybe 31 or so, says to me during the dinner, "Dad, by the way, I just want you to know that please don't meet someone who's around my age. That would be really awkward." And I didn't say anything at the time, but that hit me like a ton of bricks. And that's where I started to doubt, what did God tell me? I kept getting that same story in that same verse in the Bible about Ruth and Boaz and different parts of that story all along after that period of starting of 2008. But then I started getting another verse. The new concept or idea that God introduced to me was the seven, the concept of the seven. Now, remember that I've been trying to develop this idea that God is talking to me, that I'm going to meet and fall in love with, marry someone much younger than me. So this is where he introduced the idea, and it is in 2 Kings 5:14. Naaman was a leper. You'd have to go and read the story yourself. I'm just going to focus on this verse. "So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times. And when he came up out of the water, his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy." Emphasis on young. So around the time of beginning of 2010, and I don't remember if I had already gotten that verse about the dunking himself in the Jordan 7 times and coming up like the flesh of a young boy, all that. I met this girl in a church service, and she, from day one, came after me. I never did anything to pursue her. I never approached her. I never started a conversation. I didn't ask for a number, nothing. She asked for my number. She pursued me the entire time. And we started hanging out. And over time, she's a very attractive young lady. I started developing feelings for her. Now, remember, I'm coming off of my second divorce. I'm feeling like a failure. I can't seem to stay married. I can't seem to keep a woman. So this was quite a thing for me. And the fact that I wasn't doing anything. So we started hanging out. I started developing feelings, and I finally get to the point where I declare that I have feelings for her. And then she freaked out and backed away. But let's call that like a Tuesday. The Sunday before, so 2 days before, we're in the same church service. We're sitting probably in the same place. She's sitting on my right. This other girl another attractive young lady comes and sits next to me on my left. And it was just almost like an out of body experience. They started competing for my attention, the one on the right and the one on the left, ignoring each other totally, just trying to get my attention, trying to get me to talk to one or the other, and going back and forth the entire time. And during that process, somehow, number two, I think number two slips me a piece of paper with her number and I think like call me or something. Anyway, 2 days later, I declare my feelings for number one. She freaks out. That's the end of it. That very night, number two, somehow I hadn't given her my number because I didn't call her. I must have texted her my number or something, but I didn't call her. She calls me and says, "Hey, would you like to have dinner?" Okay. And then the whole thing would be started all over again. It was eerie how similar everything was going down. So after some time in hanging out together and spending a lot of time together, again, this one took longer, but I started having feelings for her as well, and probably a lot of it was my neediness, but whatever. And I declare myself to her, and she didn't freak out. We went back and forth. It's like she wanted to hang on to me, but in the end, she also wanted to go back to her ex-husband or something. So it ended. I remember that night driving home, I was very upset at God, and I was like, God, what are you doing to me? But I couldn't ignore that something was going on because everything had happened almost like scene by scene. It was the parallels, the similarities were just too much to ignore. And that's when he reminded me of the verse of the seven. And I said, okay, wow, this is crazy. And I wasn't sure, but I was starting to get this idea that there were going to be more. Now, I learned this over time, but it was interesting that both of these girls were much younger than what I was used to, and number two was younger than number one. So the question arises as, why is God doing this to me? What is His purpose? If you're a Christian, you have any time with God, you've read the Bible, the Bible talks about that God is love, that everything works together for good for those who love Him. If you, being evil, know how to give if your son asks you for bread, would you give him a stone? And if you, being evil, how much your Heavenly Father knows how to give you good things, and so on. So there has to be a good purpose for why God was doing this weird thing with me. But this video is getting on long. If you're interested, go on to number two.